Hello, internets. Welcome to another episode of the Get Geek podcast. We're going to come to you this week with some news about the release of the Snyder Cut of Justice League. But first, a disclaimer. I want to let you all know that because of the current situation with COVID-19, we are recording remotely, me and the crew. So I want to thank you guys for understanding. There might be some sound artifacts, some feedback that you might not be used to in some of our other podcasts. So just please bear with us. We're trying to iron them out as best as we can, but it might just be an issue until we can get back into recording together. I just want to remind you all as well to like, share, subscribe. Check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Check us out on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever your favorite podcasts are sold. It would do us a great service if you would like, rate, share, subscribe, or social media it up on any of our podcast platforms. And thank you all, the crew out there that's listening to our podcast. Let's get right into the introductions. You guys know me. I'm Jose.
This is Wolfie.
AJ.
And this is Walt.
Let's get right into it. Walt, I think you're our fount of news and information regarding the Snyder Cut. Can you give us a little bit of background so we can jump in and give our feedback?
Sure, let's go because there's a lot to dig in here.
All right.
After years of hashtags and billboards and banners flying over with airplanes and stuff like that, the thing that seemed impossible is actually happening, believe it or not. And probably one of the biggest geek announcements in quite a bit. We're getting the Snyder Cut after that huge campaign of hashtag release the Snyder Cut
From everyone.
Everybody was, and so Zack Snyder initially was supposed to do the Justice League, but there was tragedy in his family, so he had to step away from that. But it seems like he had 90% of the movie done. But the studio then got the services of Joss Whedon, who is famously known for the Avengers films, among other things. And so he completed the film, but he did another version of the film. So since that movie came out and it wasn't truly well received, the clamor has been released the Snyder Cut. And
Yes.
so on Wednesday,
Walt, and you talking about that for a second, I don't know if you guys would mind to do a slight aside regarding that, but I kind of want to talk for a moment, if we can. Interestingly to me about the implication of the fact that we're getting the Snyder Cut, and what I mean by that is how this is going to change the industry. If we can only touch on that for a second. And the other thing that's very interesting to me, and this is only if you guys are interested in touching on this as well. This is actually a smaller point, but I do find it kind of interesting. You mentioned the original, or not the original director, but the replacement director, Joss Whedon. There's a weird implication for me that's always felt kind of odd about the Release the Snyder Cut campaign. And it's honestly how kind of the cast themselves, for lack of a better word, sugar honey iced tea'd all over the Joss Whedon cut, in how adamant they were to get the Snyder Cut released. What are your guys' thoughts on that? If you could just give me that for a second, because I don't know, I've been thinking about that kind of even more than the news itself.
I mean, personally, the thing is that, like, I don't know how Joss Whedon feels about it, but at the same time, Zack Snyder is the person that they've like bonded with throughout this whole process, and if the film was 90% complete, then they felt like they already made the film, and if they get the substitute teacher, and it's all good and gravy with them, but it's not their film, right? It's Warner Brothers film, but it's not
Mhm.
theirs. And I think that that's kind of that's how I feel about it. They want to see the film that they intended to make from the beginning, and then I think that, like, it's worthwhile to note that they support the work that they originally did that much that they really want to see it out there.
Okay. The other thing that I was kind of touching upon, and you kind of touched upon it as well, is like what's interesting to me is, like I said, the fact that a fan backlash of sorts, or a fan campaign, we'll call it. I don't want to call it a backlash because it wasn't necessarily a negativity campaign as so much as they wanted to see the original vision from Zack Snyder, excuse me. Um, but it's interesting to me in the same way. And again, just want to make a quick point of this, and then we can definitely move on to the meat and potatoes of it. But like, it's interesting to me that this kind of mirrors, in a way, what happened with Sonic the Hedgehog, in how you had a big fan campaign that actually ended up changing the movie in a huge way. And in this sense, we have a cut of the movie being released. I think it's interesting because you've never really seen something like this before. I mean, and maybe not to in this exact way, where the fans have enough power to get Warner Brothers to release this whole other version of the movie. I don't know how they're involved in the production regarding HBO, because it's going to be released on HBOMax, if I'm not mistaken. But like, that's something that's really interesting to me, because it could be a positive or a negative with how much power that fans have been given over like the last year or so, with this kind of impact on Sonic the Hedgehog's production, and on the fact that we got the Snyder Cut released. I don't
I
know.
mean,
You got any thoughts on that?
I think that, like, ultimately what's gone on is that, nerdcore has taken over the entire world, and this is just another iteration of Revenge of the Nerds. That's the way that I look at it. You got to kind of please the nerds nowadays, which is why we got the Sonic the Hedgehog fix, which is why we unfortunately also got, which we are now beating with a dead horse, the fan service in Rise of Skywalker, and why we're now getting redemption with the Snyder Cut. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't actually heard or read anything of the Snyder Cut, the points on it, the differences and stuff like that, other than knowing that it's totally awesome. So I'm like super excited to hear what's going on and what all the kind of perceived changes are, and what makes it so much more awesome than Joss Whedon's, unfortunately.
Okay, so in a nutshell, it kind of goes both ways. Like, there's some good things that have come out of this new fan power that the internet has given everybody, and some not so
Yeah.
great things, i.e., Star Wars. Anyways, all right. So thank you guys for indulging me on that sort of quick aside. And I will turn it back over to you, Walt, to give us some more details on how the meat and potatoes and the details go when it comes to the Snyder Cut.
Alrighty then. So the uh the Snyder cut was kind of announced on Wednesday. Snyder was doing a live stream of the DC movie A Man of Steel, and he was doing this on the announcement was done on Vero, and that's the social media platform that he uses. He doesn't use Facebook, he doesn't use Instagram, he doesn't use Twitter. It's just this Vero app, which not a lot of people know about, but it's kind of out there. um During this live stream, we had Henry Cavill join, and he joined with his full Mission Impossible mustache. And Deborah Snyder, Zack Snyder's wife, also joined, and she's not only his wife but also the production uh, partner with him in terms of pretty much all the movies that he does. And so, as soon as Cavill came on, you had some of the fans, and all of a sudden, release the Snyder cut started trending on their chat. And so, after a little back and forth, Cavill goes to Snyder and he says, I think you should release it. Snyder then goes, he says, well, I can't release it, but I can show you this. And then he showed the poster of the Zack Snyder cut that we've seen probably a gazillion times on all of the social media platforms. At that point, I think Instagram and Facebook and definitely Twitter, they just blew up, right? So here's some of the details when it comes to the Snyder cut, right? There's still some work that needs to be done. There's still some stuff that has to be done in post production. But again, 90% of the film is done. So he's bringing back a lot of the production staff. The guys that work on the VFX, the guys that work on music. Directors, all that stuff. And the studio is putting about $30 million into the film to see the final version realized. Now,
So this is Warner Brothers that's pouring money into it, and
Correct.
HBO is getting the fruit of their labor. They're distributing
Right.
it. Okay.
Well, Warner Brothers and HBO are owned by the same company, so
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah.
Makes
So
sense.
it's Warner Brothers is doing it almost as a way to kind of promote HBO Max, which comes out on May 27th, I believe.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So again, this thing is 90% done. It's almost a 4-hour cut. It's exactly 214 minutes long. So there's some rumors out there that they're going to release it as a film itself, or there is also a rumor that it could be chopped up into like a miniseries where they do 6 TV episode type uh episodes, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um the interesting thing is that the Snyders said that they were going to score, and this is a direct quote, they were going to score, cut, add new, and finish old visual effects, and maybe bring back many of the actors to record additional dialogue. Now, a
Okay.
lot of people were really, really excited about that, but that was shut down very quickly. And I'm going to give you a direct quote from the guy that broke that news. That's Umberto Gonzalez from The Wrap.
Okay.
And this is what he said. He said, "There's not going to be any reshoots of any kind with any actors. It's just additional dialogue. Here's something that hasn't been reported yet. Snyder did want to shoot and he wanted to do additional photography, but HBO Max said no. That's not happening. We'll give you money for post production, for special effects, for scoring, and even ADR, but no reshoots of any kind on this movie." He continues to say that this movie is basically a one and done. This is to close the loop, to finish the story. Maybe not the whole
Mhm.
story, because Snyder did have like a 3 to 5 picture plan, but the
Right.
Snyderverse will end with the Snyder Cut. Don't expect any spin-offs with
Oh,
Batman or with Ben Affleck as Batman
oh,
or any of that. So, there's a lot of information that was parsed out. There's still a lot of information that is conflicting, but the long and the short of it is that the impossible is happening and we are getting the Snyder Cut in 2021. So it's going to take a little bit of time before we see it,
Hmm.
but we do have some rumors on the differences, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Just on the news of what we've heard, what do you guys think about this?
So
yeah. Go ahead.
it's yeah. I was gonna say it's definitely confirmed that HBO is not gonna do any reshoots of any kind, right? Because we are these all completely confirmed details. I think you said that some of this is still up in the air and conflicting, right? So
Yeah,
there
no,
is still
the HBO Max stuff is pretty much confirmed. They're not going to be bringing back the actors.
okay,
So, and I think that's, just given the nature of where we are right now, it's kind of an impossibility so far, you
right.
know.
That does sound
That-
about right anyway, because you figure that there's going to be some contractual things in dealing with the actors regarding
right,
that, especially
exactly.
if you have the situation with Henry Cavill where he didn't even want to appear in Shazam
Yeah.
over whatever the reason was, but some of it was supposedly and seemingly money. So
Yeah,
I
these
understand
actors these actors have schedules. They have contractors that they've signed for other projects, and just because we've been paused for like 2 or 3 months now doesn't mean that once we unpause, things are wide open again. They're contractually obligated to honor those contracts. So scheduling definitely is going to be an issue, and I don't think HBO wants to drop too much money on this anyway. It's good that they're giving them $30 million, but to bring these actors back is probably going to cost a lot more. So
you figure also that they don't really need to drop a lot of money on it, because anybody who's been clamoring to see this is going to find a way to watch it. And it's just like with Game of Thrones, where HBO sort of had the attitude, I don't know if you guys remember, where they didn't really care that people were pirating it as long as it was in the conversation. I think they'll have the same approach to the Snyder Cut.
yep. And
The o-
the interesting thing about the Snyder Cut, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Snyder did say that from the original movie, that only has a fourth of what he filmed. So we're looking at a substantially different movie when it does come out.
Now, what exactly are the things that make it different? For those of
Well,
us, i.e.,
let
me, who
I,
doesn't really know.
I wanted to make a point actually in relation to at least one difference that I believe I'm aware of, and it's in regards to this decision not to do reshoots. And I feel like there might be an easy way around this, but I can't remember the actor's name. If anybody can look this up for me, he was also in The Matrix, but the character who played the general, the military general in Man of Steel,
Yes,
uh,
I think his name is Lennox.
he was
Um,
supposed to be Martian Manhunter
yep,
in the
and
Snyder cut
that's
of.
going to be one of the differences. Henry Lennox is Harry Lennox. I'm
So
sorry.
they'll probably do the voiceover and do CGI to create the Martian Manhunter character. It was supposed to be a brief appearance, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? He's because he doesn't play a huge role in the conflict, the final conflict.
Right. And the
Okay.
issue with that is that my understanding is that those scenes where he was Martian Manhunter, those were one of the things that was not shot prior.
Okay. So
So
we have some issues there then, but it could be done. Conceivably, a lot of it could be done in CGI.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right. Walt, give us a couple of more details on some of the differences because you probably have a list waiting on that
I
besides just that small one. Go ahead.
I do. First of all, the sequence that was in Batman versus Superman, that nightmare sequence, that figures heavily in the movie, which it was
Uh-huh.
complete. If I remember correctly, it was completely cut from the Justice League movie, right?
Yeah.
No, the entire sequence was not cut. There was only a brief part of it. The Batman and Superman conflicts. Oh no, I'm sorry. That was in Batman versus Superman with the.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
you're right. Okay.
Yeah, in
The
Justice
nightmare
League,
sequence.
they
Yes, you're
didn't
right.
even
Okay.
acknowledge it.
Hmm. That was supposed to figure into the final conflict, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Yeah, it was shedding light on the future of what was gonna happen. From what I've gathered here, there was a sequence where they were going to show a destroyed Hall of Justice, so we would have seen the Hall of Justice in Justice League,
Mhm.
Oh
and
man.
there would have been an Omega symbol in Gotham Harbor. So there was a lot of stuff that was tied in that, like I said, was completely disregarded in Joss Whedon's version.
A lot of it, I don't recall if it was supposed to be in this movie, but it was supposed to lead up to a very much Kingdom Come slash Injustice sort of hybrid storyline where Superman was going to be a villain in Zack Snyder's Ultimate Vision. Correct? I believe that that's something that I had seen regarding where he was going with the storyline.
I think what we saw in Justice League is kind of what we would have seen in the Snyder cut as well.
Hmm.
He would have been resurrected, and he would have had that brief moment where he had that. We would have seen the black suit, definitely. That is something that Snyder has put up repeatedly on Vero,
Hmm.
pictures of Cavill in the black suit. Um, it would have been a little bit different the fight after the resurrection, but again, Lois would be the one that would come in to kind of save the day and bring Superman back to his senses.
That's. I mean, man, I can't wait because that's fan service to see Superman in the black suit. This is just super dope. That's like one of those times where I was like, I'm excited for DC. I'm gonna
Have you
cross
seen
over
him in
literally.
the black suit?
I have
Yeah,
actually.
he looks amazing, right?
Yeah, hell yeah. I just don't I really do want to know why they even decided to, go in this new direction. I mean, obviously, like they brought in Joss Whedon to do his own thing and stuff like that, but to go so drastically far left from what they already had, if the film was already pretty much done, um,
It
to
was
me,
second
it's almost
guessing, I
like
think.
I don't think that it's second guessing. I think it's that Warner saw that like, hey, you know what? We're not gonna come out of this how we wanted it to. So let's try to wrap it up real nice in this one film and forget about this.
Well, I
But
think
the reason I think that it was a little bit of them out sort of outthinking themselves was because if you recall around that time a lot of the conversation centered around the fact that Marvel and the MCU was doing so much better because of the lighter tone,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
DCEU was doing so much worse because of the dark and gritty tone, which I don't think is the entire reason.
I
But
don't think it's the reason either.
no, that,
but that's where they kind of faltered in believing that, in thinking that that was the entire reason. The reason was that tonally it wasn't consistent, maybe with the DCEU characters in their own comics. Having that as the overarching tone might have been the issue, but like that's why I felt like they ended up going this other way, where they decided to make it so much more comedic. You had Batman cracking jokes and doing all these stupid things that Batman would never do.
Yeah, yeah,
I
Um,
agree with that because and if you remember around the time, there was actually some backlash against Snyder and his, like you said, his tone of these movies. You know, this was almost and I hate to phrase it this way, but the fact that he had that tragedy in his family, it was almost a convenient way for Warner Brothers to say, you know what, we're probably going to start severing ties here. And again, this was supposed to be probably like a 5 film, epic and stuff. And so this was a good way for to have Whedon come in, like you said, give it some of that Marvel flavor to it, and then at the same time kind of
yeah,
start shutting this franchise down in
yeah.
lieu of something else,
I think by the time Batman versus Superman came out, they already knew that Justice League wasn't going to be a big thing, especially with the production issues. Um, Getting back to the newer cut for a second, I'm throwing out some things that I've heard, and I guess Walt, you can confirm if this is how they're making changes or not, because it's all rumor mill to me from what I've heard in the past. But I heard that one of the big things, and this is something that would definitely excite AJ if that's the case, we get to see Darkseid in this, don't we? Even if he doesn't play a huge role in the end,
oh no, he
according
does. He
he
does.
does factor into this. So why don't you tell
And
us a little bit about how he factors into the, because I think in the beginning he gets introduced and then he factors into the end, but the introduction is something that stood out to me. They show a lot more of him in the conflict, that conflict where they show Steppenwolf in
yep,
the beginning of Justice League actually shows Darkseid in the Snyder Cut, doesn't it?
yep, and they show him as a younger version of himself.
Okay.
And I
Still as
guess,
the Dark Ruler at that
right,
point.
his version, I guess maybe AJ can speak to his through
yeah.
access.
AJ, why don't
Yes,
you give us a little bit of
that's who he
background?
was before he became Darkseid.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that whole sequence of when they were fighting with Ares and the invasion of the Earth showed him in that former self of him. And there is an actor that played him. His name is Ray Porter. And once the news came out, he tweeted immediately. He was like, "Yeah, I'm in it." He voiced the role of Darkseid. So Darkseid eventually, and I don't want to give away the film because it's kind of foul. We haven't even seen it yet. And again, a lot of this stuff seems to be substantiated, but you still got to take it with a grain of salt because nobody
That's
has
true.
actually seen it. You know,
Could all be nonsense.
but the
Well,
final third act has to deal with Darkseid arriving. So that was supposed to be the climax of the film.
yes.
So he does play a much larger and substantial role. Well, he didn't play a role at all in Justice League. They just mentioned him a couple of times.
It was supposed to be a two-film arc with him moving into a future conflict with them in the second film.
Right.
Wasn't that something about what it was supposed to be? Okay.
Yep.
Does anybody here think that like after the Snyder Cut is released that there's gonna be another movement where that it's like
Release Justice League 2?
finish the cut, finish the cut, finish the Snyder Cut or whatever? Because I feel like they could, if it's really really well received. I feel like they totally could, just like, hey, let's finish this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
yeah, because I mean, like if the fans want it, I mean, look, the client's always right. Am I right? And if we want it bad enough, like they'll give it to us in one way or another. And the other thing too that has happened is that like I feel like Snyder was poorly criticized for the whole like dark tone. because after he was removed from everything, everyone's just looking at all of Snyder's stuff and it's like, oh my god, look how awesome his work is and how different it is from everything else, and we want this back. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of his films are at first kind of seen as like, oh, it's too dark, I don't like it, but then you let it kind of marinate a little, and people are like, wait, this is cool and it's different and it's not like anything else, and we want more of this.
I
Can I
think
say something about that, Gabe? Because you hit a point that's right on. Because the battle at the end of Joss Whedon's
Justice League.
version,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right? That occurred in Russia, right?
Hmm.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
that was originally shot also, but the difference was that that whole scene was supposed to have been taken place at night.
Yeah. They completely CGI'd the heck out of it with that overly crazy red
yeah.
like
That's why I don't know. Yeah, it
nonsense.
doesn't. I don't like it, but
Yeah, so that goes to your point where it's like, everything is dark and stuff like that. We would have gotten that scene and it would have been dark just like Snyder likes to do, his films.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't think there was anything wrong with the overall. I mean, maybe the overall dark tone in the sense that here's what I think was kind of wrong with it. I think when it came to Batman as a character in Batman vs Superman, not in Justice League, because obviously that wasn't that wasn't Zack Snyder's vision. Tonally, I think it was okay, even if some people had an issue with him being more violent. I think that was fine for that particular incarnation of Batman. I think the issue that everyone always had, and even though I liked Man of Steel, I think the issue was that there was never the optimistic Superman that we get in the comic books. We never got the good old American Boy Scout that has that sunny optimism. We just got a brooding Henry Cavill, and for a certain amount of the storyline, I think that was okay. But that's just not who Superman has ever been tonally. I think that was the big error. You could do that with Batman. They were never going to do that with the Flash. The Flash is always going to be the jokester. You know, Cyborg was always going to be the serious one. Wonder Woman was perfectly handled tonally in all of the movies she was in. It was really Superman that even though Henry Cavill did a great job, it's where he kind of faltered tonally. And I want to see, from what I've heard of the Snyder Cut, I think he actually does get to complete that arc in
Yeah,
a at least more substantial way, where we get to see the sunny optimism Superman that we're supposed to.
and I think
And it
that's
doesn't have to be completely cheesy, but it can still have a little bit of grittiness to it. But that's where I think tonally he kind of slightly faltered, and I
you
want
know,
to see where he does what he does with this.
And I think part of the thing though is that I think that was the whole plan from the start. And again, I can't speak to that because we don't know what Snyder had planned, until we see
Yeah.
this movie. But I think Snyder, what he likes to do is he likes to deconstruct his heroes. And
Yes.
I think what part of the arc that Cavill's character Superman was going to go was that originally, he comes in, he's the stranger, he's the alien and stuff like that. And they were going to bring him down and then, transform him into the Superman that we know and love. And I think part of, the failing of it is that we just never saw Snyder's vision realized to see that. But I think, and again, this is just me, but I think that was one of the finishing arcs for that character. Eventually, that was going to happen.
yeah, no, I mean, I agree, and I think that that's kind of like one of those issues where, I don't know if it's we as fans,
Mhm.
DC and Warner as corporate, you know, companies and stuff like that with their own self interest in mind. But this I think is just not having faith in the process of storytelling, because it's very clear that the arc with Clark Kent Superman with Henry Cavill's iteration is very much that. It's the alien stranger who at first doesn't feel comfortable trying to step forward, and then when he does step forward isn't necessarily accepted by everyone, aka Batman. And then when he's resurrected after he has committed the sacrifice, he has now he will now mature into that, I don't want to say goody two shoes, but that light of hope, that ray of hope, that Boy Scout, that we all expect. But because we didn't see it from the very get, the fans, you know have this outcry of like, hey, that's not my Superman, this, that, and the other, and then Warner Brothers translating that to sales and their bottom dollar, their bottom
Mhm.
line rather, see that as like, well, that's not what the fans wanted, so we're just going to cut this short. We're not going to give you a chance at redemption or to finish the story arc, and that's a shame,
Right.
because clearly that decision ends up being the worst of the two. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you gotta just let the process play out. And you know what? This actually, it sucks that I keep bringing up Star Wars, but
Mm.
this is something that I think as fans we need to start kind of realizing that we're at fault here. I mean, maybe not me myself because I'm all for, you know, I was always for Zack Snyder stuff and Ryan Johnson stuff and everything, but this I think is a bigger conversation of like, are we influencing the outcomes of
Right.
these things more than we should, right? Because the reason that this ended up being the way that it was is because of us, the fans. The reason that we got the Rise of Skywalker is because we clamored for it. We wanted it. This is what we
Yeah.
wanted, and we forced the
The
companies to
collective
be
will.
like, "Hey, you know what?
Mhm.
We have to give this to them. Otherwise, they're not gonna, go see the movie."
Right.
And that
That touches
sucks.
upon the point that I was making earlier. It's like how much power should we have in these situations? Because in a way, we kind of ruined the Zack Snyder vision, and then
Yeah,
of course the tragedy was kind of the final. I can't use the term like nail, but like you understand what I mean there. That kind of like just ruined the Zack Snyder trilogy, the Zack Snyder, the continuity, and then we resurrected it. So
yeah.
where that seems like a very very odd way to influence this overall because we hated it and now we love it again because we saw that the thing that we had rejected ended up with the Joss Whedon version that was even worse than any other thing that Zack Snyder had tried to do before that.
I mean, which kind of sucks because it's not anything against Joss Whedon, right? Because if Joss Whedon had it from the start, then maybe there would have been a completely different story, different tone, and everything.
Right,
We would have.
from Man of Steel, I feel like, right?
Yeah,
Like
but like
definitely from the very beginning.
yeah, but you can be the greatest sculptor in the world, but if you're tasked with the job of like finishing someone else's work, or this sculpture cracked and fell and broke apart and you got to put it back together because you're the best in the world, it's still not going to be the best work that you've ever done because it's not your work. And I
You
think
know what
that
if
like we need to make sure that we're not bashing Joss Whedon and his work, because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not entirely his work from beginning to end. He was brought in to try to salvage, in a sense.
you know
Well,
what
we
would
have
have
two
been
instances of that in the Star Wars universe because we had Rogue One, which famously had some not only reshoots but some scripting as problems as well, and we also have Han Solo, and those are two very different and distinctive versions that we got. One of them is one of the most beloved films in the Star Wars universe, being Rogue One, and the other one was a complete failure in Han Solo. You know,
I mean, I totally get that, and again, failure. I don't want to, because to
right?
me, Han
Exactly.
Solo is only a financial failure from
Yeah,
a
yeah,
certain
yeah.
perspective. But I actually rank Han Solo, higher than a lot of Star Wars films personally. But my thing is that like it's, yes, I totally get that. It's just I want to make sure that we're not like throwing Joss Whedon under the bus on something that is not necessarily his fault, right? It's not his fault that we got a bad Justice League movie. Warner
wouldn't
Brothers
it
should have just Warner Brothers should have just like released. They were like, "Hey, keep the Zack Snyder stuff going. Just finish it. If it's
No,
90%,
I was going to say, wouldn't it have been interesting if you think back, if they wanted to create a shared universe from the beginning? We ended up getting a contribution from Joss Whedon, a fine contribution from Patty Jenkins and Wonder Woman, who was central to some of the earlier movies. You got Aquaman, later the Flash hasn't even arrived in the universe yet. And you have the contribution, of course, of Zack Snyder. Wouldn't it have been interesting in a way if this shared universe was created maybe by the three of them? You have Joss Whedon handling a Superman and a Flash, and you have Zack Snyder handling Batman and some more of their kind of intricacies, and like the tone would match a little bit better in a way if they kind of worked on this together, kind of what could have been. But um
They seem to be on opposite spectrums, though.
I understand that, but like it can always kind of work if maybe you still give Zack Snyder kind of the overall creative vision. He's kind of the Feige of the thing, but you have your people working under him. Although I don't know if Joss Whedon would do that, but it still probably would have worked out a little bit better. Again, not to like crap on Joss Whedon, because he could have handled the way that he handled the Avengers and the MCU with a little bit more sunny optimism. He could have handled a Superman a little bit better from the start, and maybe given fans more of what they wanted in terms of the big blue Boy Scout, and especially Clark Kent too, which I think is where the big failing is. Not to kind of beat that to death, but Superman can be a little bit dour and be a little bit upset. He has to save the world all the time. Clark Kent is supposed to be his sunny, kind of doofy alter ego who is always kind of acting like nothing is wrong, and we
Yeah,
never got that.
yeah, that's true. But at the same time, like, it's also like, are we gonna tell the Peter Parker syndrome? Are we gonna keep telling the same story? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, of him being doofy and all that, because we've kind of matured, right? Like, as an audience, the
Yes.
original fans of the Superman, films, the Christopher Reeve Supermans, the Superman comics from the earlier years and stuff like that. Like, I think that we've matured from that, because I don't think I mean, I don't read Superman much. There's some interactions that I see in Batman and whatnot, but I don't see him as that doofy Clark Kent anymore. So I don't know if that's very reflective of what would work in today's day and age. So
Maybe
I,
not
I, I
doofy,
wouldn't want to see it. I would.
but a
I
little
mean,
more positive as a character and a little less like always upset about everything the way that he is.
positive, sure, but we never actually
Yeah.
got. I guess we also never got Clark Kent in the real world. We got Clark Kent
Yeah.
in the vestibule of his home with Lois Lane, where he can be himself. He's not Clark Kent when he's with Lois. He's Kal-El, you know. So we
Yeah.
didn't really
That's
get that
true.
too much, and the
That's
only
very
reason
true.
we didn't get that is because they didn't flesh out his growth yet. Again, all the way up until the Zack Snyder, all the way up until Justice League, we only saw this is still the beginning of Kal-El's journey. So he's still Kal-El everywhere, you know.
Hey, Gabe, have you been able to see the Ultimate Edition of Batman versus Superman?
Um, I don't remember if I have actually. I feel like I did because
Yeah.
at first I was like, that's one of those movies that like I didn't like. I really wanted to love. Like, there's a lot about that film that I love, and then there's a lot
Hmm.
that like when I
Mhm.
watch it, I remember, oh, this is why I didn't enjoy it.
Because I think the Ultimate Edition is a more superior version than the theatrical one that we got.
Yeah.
And just to your point, they did have a lot more things for Clark Kent to do in that film. You
Okay,
know,
so I'm gonna have to
they
check it out
yeah
Yeah,
they
he did
they
more
did show him.
investigating in that, right? A lot more
Right, yeah, he
investigative
was doing a
reporting.
lot more investigating and stuff, and
Which
it's
they could
not
do better.
still it's
Yeah.
not still the sunny, optimistic Clark Kent, but they did give him a little bit more to do in that film as Clark Kent.
Right. Yeah. We only got really Batman and Superman. We never really got Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent. And again, I know it wasn't
Right.
a final vision, but like Gabe's totally right, or Wolfie, you're totally right, man. Like
Yeah.
it's true that that's kind of actually maybe more what it is. It's that we just didn't get those characters enough. We never got their alter egos. Who for
Yeah.
Batman and Superman, you know, Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent are actually their alter egos, and Batman and Superman are who they really are, and that's something
Yes,
that makes them
exactly.
both interesting. And we never got that.
I mean, to
And
be fair,
just
I did. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
No, I mean, to me, like, we did kind of get a little bit of that just in the Lex Luthor's party scene, where we did have Clark Kent in there, who kind of played that a little bit, right? He played that like,
Mhm.
hey, Bruce Wayne and stuff, like, a little bit of like the naive, like, I don't know what's going on, especially with his look, that he looked like kind of like, I don't want to say a poor journalist, but he definitely not dressed for the occasion. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and
Hmm.
then his interaction with Bruce Wayne, we got to see Bruce Wayne, the kind of vain and all about money and this, that, and the other, and we saw Clark Kent being the Boy Scout. You know, like, everything that he said in that smaller interaction came from a honorable Boy Scout kind of
Mhm.
tone and stuff, and we just didn't get to see enough of that. You know.
Yeah, true, true. There's always great interactions in the comics and in the animated movies between Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, especially when they know each other, but even before they know who each other is. they always have great interactions, which makes the characters really good as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get away from that point, I wanna get, circle that back to the film, because
Hmm.
the Zack Snyder cut, supposedly we get a lot more interaction, especially with the new characters.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
we see a
Cyborg is
lot
a
more of
huge
Flash.
upgrade, right? Especially, I think
I'm sorry,
Cyborg
say again.
Cyborg gets a huge upgrade in this film, doesn't he? Because he gets nothing almost in the Joss
Right.
Whedon version.
There's actually a
See his
scene
backstory.
with him and his father.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, his father also introduces another superhero to the DC extended universe, which would be the Atom. There's scenes of him and Ryan Choi in Star Labs. We get Iris West from the Flash universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
there's more interaction between Mera and Volko with Aquaman. We get a lot more of Lex Luthor, and
For better or
we've
worse.
we've already mentioned Martian Manhunter. There was some thought that there may be a Green Lantern in it, but that was never verified.
Yeah.
The one character that's interesting that was never in Zack Snyder's cut is the end credit scene for Josh Whedon's cut, and that is Deathstroke. Deathstroke was not a character that Zack Snyder intended to introduce. That
Hmm.
is all Whedon right there.
Interesting. He's actually a good character to have been introduced, and one of the things that I actually enjoyed about the movie, surprisingly enough.
AJ, I feel like I haven't heard too much from AJ. Like what are your thoughts on everything here? I mean, let me ask you this. Like, I know we already spoke a little bit about Darkseid, but what would you have liked to have seen from Darkseid in this film and potentially in a future film if after the Snyder Cut comes out that maybe we can maybe convince HBO Max, aka or slash Warner Brothers to actually make.
And before he answers that, a little bit of backstory for Andre. He loves the character of Darkseid.
Oh
That is
yeah,
like
I
one of
can
his
exactly.
favorite
So please
DC characters.
dump away.
Andre, AJ, take it away, please.
Well, Darkseid is he is, aside from maybe one other character, a very close equivalent to Thanos.
hmm
Um, One of the things that I would have liked to see here is, and I'm sorry I have to bring this up, but DC kind of tripped up in the animated atmosphere. Very angry.
Okay. Hmm.
And it has to do with Darkseid too.
Okay.
So what they didn't do over there, which they clearly were trying to do, but ended
Hmm.
up not doing, I'm gonna suggest right here. So what I would have liked to see from this Darkseid was the setup of the Darkseid War storyline.
Okay.
And
That's cool.
it would have started the same way the New 52 started up and the same way the animated space started up, right after Flashpoint. Darkseid would have his first invasion of Earth. I'm looking for something, but except we don't know what that something is. He makes brief mention to it in the comics, but you know, it's ambiguous for now. You can't. A couple movies later, we
Hmm.
flesh out a lot of the characters like Flash, Batman, just like you do in the MCU. And then when it comes to maybe the third Justice League installment, that's where you would have had things really hit the fan. And so, what the whole premise of the Dark Side War is that Darkseid find or no, it's not Darkseid. Um, okay, before I even do that, there's another character I have to rope in here. Um, there's this guy who is definitely the the Thanos equivalent of for DC, and that guy's called the Anti Monitor. And what
Hmm.
he does is he's a Galactus, but for entire multiverses.
Okay.
So
Right.
once the new 52 kicks in, this guy is still around. And, the characters still have a history with him, even though time has been reset because of Flashpoint. But the premise of Darkseid War is that Darkseid has a daughter named Grail.
Hmm.
And what Grail does is she's traveling the multiverse and trying to seek the Anti Monitor out. And her whole angle is that she wants Darkseid and Anti Monitor to have a World War III.
Okay. Okay.
And then basically a bunch of crap happens. Superheroes get new powers because something happens with the new gods. I It's been a while since I've read the story, but basically it's your equivalent of the Infinity Saga,
Right.
and it could have been really well done.
But we never got it.
Yes, but here's my issue overall. And I've been hearing you guys talk, and the reason why I've been silent is because it's not really been a good silence.
Okay.
Uh oh,
Hmm.
Here we go.
I'm scared.
Unload.
Filling
So
in for Eli here.
Listen. His words carry weight because I think out of all of us, he knows more about the DC universe than we do. So, AJ, let it rip.
the news that, 30 million sounds awesome, but the news that they weren't, because you said Zack Snyder wanted to bring more people onto this, right? But they said no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, he wanted to bring the actors back because there I and this happens all the time. It's just part of the film process, the reshoots, right? There are certain things that when you film it, you have a certain vision, but then you realize afterwards when you're in the editing room, maybe I could have shot it from this way, or maybe if we added dialogue here, or maybe if we just scrapped this scene and added another scene. He wanted to do that, and HBO told him no.
Yes. So, in light of that, pardon my French, but it kind of feels like we're getting a half-assed product. Because if you're
For
not going to give the guy the room to complete his vision, if this is going to end the Snyderverse, I'd rather it be the completion fully and to its fullest extent. This seems like a money grab to me. Like, it doesn't feel. I'm not sure how I feel about, like. The Snyder Cut, cool. I'm alright with that, but just I don't know. It
it
doesn't feel
was.
I mean,
like
all right. I gotta interject a little bit here. I don't know if it's a half-ass. I think it'll ultimately still be incomplete. But if 90% of the film is done, okay, I think that like a little bit of you know you know editing room magic will give us the 95%. And again, maybe we will not have that extra 5% that will truly complete it. I think that ultimately, even if we got 100%, we still wouldn't truly complete it because it's not meant to be a complete film. It's supposed to be the second um the second act to an entire story. So I think that like at the end of the day, we're still only going to get a mostly complete but unfinished product.
Alright,
There's a
but
lot
see
of
that.
setup that's going to go to waste. A lot of setup is going to go to waste. Yeah.
But that's my thing. If it's already done, leave it.
So
I'm
you're
sorry.
you're.
I'm gonna come out and say that.
Do you
Because
think do you think it would make a difference to you if perhaps okay, so let's change the situation a little bit because I think let's say that Zack Snyder the unfortunate situation occurred where his daughter passed away and he had to be removed from the Justice League production for personal reasons. He decided to do it as well, and Warner Brothers, let's say that they weren't so enthusiastic to usher him out of the Snyderverse, we'll call it, and they allowed him to return after the fact and continue his story. With this disjointed Justice League that doesn't really fit into the Zack Snyder vision for the DCEU, would you be more on board with him doing it then? Is it because he won't be able to complete it, and that's the biggest thing?
Yeah. Um. s-
I know it's a hypothetical, but I kind of wonder if that would make any difference to you, because I want to try to in a way take away the narrative that surrounded how this movie got made and what you just think about it on the merits of the changes that will be made, beyond the fact, I guess, that it's not going to be completed. But hypothetically, like I said, I just want it to be completed by Zack Snyder so that you can see the if there's a difference in your mind as to whether or not this is just a cash grab, for
For
instance. That's how you
me,
put it.
for me,
Hmm.
unless you're going to take it to its completion,
Yeah.
just don't do it. I don't care if the changes are awesome at this point. Just
Wait,
don't do it.
you would really, are you part of hashtag do not release the Snyder Cut?
Don't release the Snyder Cut.
Well, at this point, I'm sorry, yes.
What in the what? Oh
Don't
my,
believe the hype.
Well,
are
you
you?
know what?
Oh my gosh!
There's some merit to what he says, because we're revisiting a movie after the fact, right? And like Jose said, this was supposed to be the first of a couple of films that delved into this, right? There's gonna be continuity issues, because remember, after Justice League we got Aquaman, and we got Wonder Woman, and so these things were shot prior to that, and we don't know how much there was that level of interaction between those directors, Patty Jenkins and I forgot the other guy, the horror guy, that
James
James
Wan.
Wan.
James Wan.
Hmm.
Thank you very much.
Hmm.
We don't know the interaction, so there's going to be stuff that we are going to do in Justice League that may kind of conflict with Aquaman and Wonder Woman, right? And remember, there's that whole thing where in the original Justice League, Aquaman, the way they spoke was they were in a water bubble, but then clearly in James Wan version, they spoke underwater just like normal. They didn't have to have oxygen to speak. So there's that I guess argument to be made, that why are you going to revisit something that's already with that ship is already sailed in terms of the DCE universe. And the other thing is that if this thing turns out to be awesome, the next thing is going to be, let's continue this iteration of Justice League, but we've already moved on from that.
But have we though? I was gonna make the point. If you look at
Batman's
these,
not coming back.
no, I understand that, but who
Affleck's
cares
not
at
coming
this
back.
point? I mean, you can still recast that role. You can certainly recast other parts of it and move forward with the original vision. I mean, I'm not saying they should, but I'm making the argument that there's certainly a possibility, because what's actually really planned for the DCEU after this? There's nothing really besides Wonder Woman 1984, and you could argue that that doesn't necessarily need to perfectly fit into the continuity of these Justice League movies, because it occurred before.
I mean, couldn't you flashpoint everything anyway?
Yeah, that's also true. They could create the Flashpoint movie as the next thing after, let's
But
Okay,
say,
but
this comes
Flashpoint,
out.
but
you can't do it too soon, because then the Flashpoint to me is something that you're if we're looking at Marvel, that they took 23 films to do it.
Yes.
But with Flashpoint, to me, you got to do that in the latter half of that thing, because, or even towards the end, you've had to have built a universe that everybody is comfortable with to do a Flashpoint, because at that point it's just like, who cares? We never got a chance to really know these characters, and we're doing a Flashpoint already. You
not
know what I'm
even
saying?
that. You'd need to tell their stories all over again, because Flashpoint, it's not just resetting the universe, you're also resetting the characters.
And
So
just,
that also comes with completely different backstories sometimes.
yeah.
All
And
right, all
just to bounce off of the Flashpoint thing, that was a power that was supposed to be shown in Snyder's cut, because there is a point in time where the Flash actually times travels back to kind of fix something that happens. I'm not going to give it away, because I feel like I'm giving away a lot of the movie already. You know what I'm saying?
Allegedly,
But
anyway, right? These are
yeah, yeah,
Alleg-
yeah. You know, but to me, a flashpoint thing is something that you do at the very end of an entire arc. It shouldn't really be a thing that, well, we screwed up these 5 past films, let's just use a flashpoint, because to me that's just lazy. You know what I'm saying? You want to
I
have the
mean,
flashpoint to be a very significant event in the DCEU. If you do it too early, you lose that significance.
but then what
wasn't
happens?
was
What
not
happens?
the rumor though that the Flash movie was going to be written by Ezra Miller and he was going to do Flashpoint or Crisis on Infinite Earths or something
Yeah,
huge.
no, I
He was
agree, and
gonna do
I don't like the idea at all, to
it.
be honest. And to be quite honest, that Flash movie is somewhat in jeopardy just because of the that
Yeah.
video that came out with
Yeah.
Ezra Miller.
Oh, right,
Um,
Wait,
right, right. Yeah.
so that may not happen
I have no
anyway.
idea. I have no idea
Yeah,
what this is.
Ezra Miller like beat up some woman, didn't he? For
What?
like yeah, he like
What?
chucked her over or something like that, right? Walt, you
Yeah,
remember
he
the
just
details,
threw her
right?
down. He threw her down on the floor, and
He like hip tossed her or something, like judo threw
yeah,
her or something like that.
he did. He pulled off some WWE stop moves, I think, or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't a really good look, and I don't think they've
Wow.
explained the reason why he did it anyway. Still, right?
I don't think so. No, I think it's still something that's under investigation. Or he was choking her. That's what it was. He
Oh,
chokes
okay.
Yeah.
a
Yeah, yeah,
fan.
yeah. I don't know how
So
he comes back
yeah,
to that role at that point. You know?
yeah. I mean, who knows what the heck is going to happen to him? I don't think he's been arrested, but I don't think he was that great as the Flash anyway. So I'm okay with moving on. And Ben Affleck was good as Batman, but if this does end up being something that's a heck of a lot better, and the DCEU is kind of floating through this, let's say this different approach where they're not really connecting these other movies to the main storyline, it's kind of easy to slide Zack Snyder back in there if they really wanted to, depending on the level of success of this film. I look at it that way. You don't have to flashpoint it or do any of that. I think it's okay if you continue with the vision that he had with different actors. That's just
I
my
mean,
thoughts.
look. I think that like at the end of the day, there's something we were kind of talking about right before this, related to something entirely different. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, like remember what we were talking about when it comes to perfection, right? Like if you wait for it to be perfect to release it, you're never gonna release it.
Yeah,
And since we do have so much of it already done, and we want it so badly, and the thing is that like I don't think that there would be this much support from the cast in releasing a product that will overshadow their own performances in a movie that was released if they didn't believe in it this much,
Especially
um,
Jason Momoa. He's been like a super proponent of this film.
well,
big
here's the thing:
picture as well.
Jason Momoa is super vocal about everything. Really, he's like
Yeah,
probably
That is
insanely
true.
vocal about whatever he does. But I
Ray
think
Fisher is not, and
Ray
he was
Fisher's
crazy
not.
about it.
But let me point to the fact that I believe the very first
Mhm.
person to ask to release a Snyder Cut was Ben Affleck. He was. This is where the uproar came, where he just did
Yeah,
one tweet out with nothing else except for the hashtag "release the Snyder Cut." You know,
yeah, because Henry
that,
Cavill was the one
that,
who was kind of silent until the end.
Henry Cavill. It's because Henry Cavill's the company man. He's the
Yeah,
goody two shoes. Like I'm not going to stir the pot.
he's the actual
And Ben
Superman.
Affleck,
He's
and
the
Ben
perfect
Affleck,
Superman. Yeah.
Ben Affleck not caring. He's like release the Snyder Cut. And oh god, like that to me tells me that like he does still want to be a part of this universe, even if he's not going to act in it anymore. You know.
Ben
So
Affleck, you
yeah,
or yeah. I think he enjoyed Zack Snyder's vision, and I think that maybe part of the reason that he didn't decide to create the Batman movie himself is because he was no longer going to have the feedback of a Zack Snyder. If you figure that if the DCEU continued under Zack Snyder and everything had
yeah.
gone the way that it was supposed to, that Batman movie would have been a co-creation between him and Ben Affleck to a certain extent. So maybe he just couldn't do it by himself. I don't know. I mean, if all of this worked out the way that it should have, and WB wasn't so darn honestly like greedy, they would
Inept.
have given Zack Snyder some time to like get over, not get over, but like deal with his personal issues, and then let him get back to work. You
Yeah,
figure,
because the other thing
it,
too is that Zack Snyder clearly loves the work that he did and loves it because he wouldn't be this involved. He wouldn't be like with this whole the Zack Snyder cut thing himself. He'd be shooting it down if he really didn't like, have some sort of real attachment to it. And if Warner Brothers just said, "Hey man, take the time that you need. We'll finish this when we can," and stuff like that, and who knows? To be honest with you, if they had given him that time, he probably would have. It would have probably, you know, helped grieve as well. Sometimes when you have like a project or some sort of deadline, it can help you kind of get to where you need to be from
yeah.
a personal standpoint, and whatnot. So I don't know.
And yeah, I don't want
It's
to trivialize the tragedy, but
yeah,
like it might have even been a better product in the end
yeah,
with something, because
yeah,
that's how a lot of great art is created, sadly, like through pain and tragedy. Maybe there would have been something that he would have had to say that would have really made the movie a lot better, that would have been relevant to his story as well, and help people going through the type of thing that he
yes,
was going through. Who
yeah,
knows?
See,
We
there,
never got to
there's
see that.
there's a. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's a thing that kind of bothers me, and we kind of spoke about this really early in the thing, but I think it's something that I think I want to address now because
Hmm.
you know Ben Affleck may have started the release, the hashtag release the Snyder Cut,
Hmm.
but if you go on Snyder's Vero account, he has been very active in releasing concept art and production stills. Within the last year he's been super active, just dropping. And I think his um what's the word, the fact that he's been so active in putting this stuff out kind of stirred the pot with the fans. And there's something about that I'm super excited to see this. I did enjoy Snyder's films, and I wanted to see the end of his vision. But there's something about this that doesn't really sit right with me, because you know what? This kind of goes to the bigger, there's two issues here at point. You're kind of undermining the fact that Josh Whedon released his that version of Justice League with every single post that you put out, showing here's a shot of Cavill in the black suit, here's some concept art of Darkseid, here's what I would have done with this. You're kind of undermining all the work that Whedon did, good, bad, or indifferent, right? With every post that you put out there, you're making it more confrontational between what was put out and what you think your vision what should have been. And I understand that as an artist, he has that vision, and that's very important to him. But this also leads to the other point that I'm going to make, is that at some point, and this, you see this happening in Star Wars, where everybody believes they're entitled to see what they need to see, right? And if you don't like it, you bash it, you destroy it, you go after the actors that worked on the project. It's that toxicity of fandom that's really making fandom worse for a lot of people. And stuff like this doesn't kind of help it. If anything, it emboldens some of the more negative people in fandom to even shout louder, because now, hey, guess what? With all the pressure that we put on the studio as fans to get this thing done, I mean, there's talk now that they're going to re-release Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I was about to actually make that point too,
Yeah.
because there's a
And it's
give us
crazy.
the air cut, release the air cut is the new hashtag now that HBO Max has taken this one on.
There's something to be said for, what, this is what the director and the crew and the actors, this was their vision. And if you like it, great, and if you don't, you have the right to not like it either. But then, now we're in this dangerous point where if you don't like it, start a petition. There's word now that there's a lot of TikTok videos and Instagram videos of fans burning their Blu-rays of Justice League.
Wow.
that's
you know
crazy.
it gets to a point where it's like, you know what, the consumer does have power, right? I get that, but the power should be, if you like something, go see it. If you don't go see it. It shouldn't be, you know what, we're now going to remake it because a small sector of fans, negative or whatever, decide that this is what they want to see.
Well,
Well,
I'll make a quick, maybe more hopeful counterpoint, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is what's going to occur, but if you look at it from a different perspective, the good thing about this is that instead of the what we would mostly call negative influence of studio heads telling directors what they should do, which is in a sense what happened on Justice League, because again, instead of giving some time for Zack Snyder to finish his vision, they listened to the admittedly negative fandom, right, that didn't like his previous visions for the universe. So they're obviously, that illustrates the other side of it, but you still get to see, maybe if we get to the Ayer cut as well, you get to see more original visions of what those directors wanted to do with their films before the studio intervened, before the studio replaced them, before they did whatever it is that eventually we would probably all agree ended up making those movies worse. I feel like we would have gotten a better product, and we'll probably see a better product in the full Zack Snyder vision of Justice League. And Suicide Squad was a god awful mess that I think all of us pretty much hated. Okay, and I, by the way, I saw Harley Quinn recently, Birds of Prey, and it was a heck of a lot better than that. So kudos to the creators of that film in comparison to Suicide Squad. Um, the the other interesting thing about it is, to me, you look at some of how this has occurred in the past, where you got the director's vision after some fan backlash. My favorite example of this has always been the original Blade Runner film, because I've seen all the cuts of this movie, and if you see the original full Ridley Scott cut of the movie, it is, in my opinion, far superior. So, are we reaching a point now where, with these fan campaigns, we're giving more power back to these creators to create their original visions? Is
hold
that
No,
on.
something that we can get as well?
I'm
Or yeah, go
fine.
ahead.
I'm
It sounds
fine
like
with that. But do we really need 5 different versions of Blade Runner?
no, we don't. We don't.
And
But maybe we
that's
won't
what
get
we
all five of
have.
those in the beginning. Maybe this will teach studios to just give their creation over a little bit more to whoever it is that they decided to trust
Th-
with it.
This kind of stuff
Maybe.
happens all the time. I mean, we've been doing a rewatch of Fringe, and one of the best examples, and this happens all the time with TV shows.
Hmm.
The TV, the showrunners, they create their shows, and
Oh
they
God,
put it
this.
they put it in a certain way, because for them, in their vision, it works. But there are times where the network will take an actual episode and say, you know what, we don't want it in this place, we're going to move it here. And a perfect example of them messing around with it, where it creates continuity issues, there's a character in Fringe. His name is Charlie Francis. He's one of the FBI agents. And spoiler alert, but hey, this show's been on for a long time, and if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, you should have seen it already. But he dies in the show, I think in the first season, right? Or the second season, okay? There is literally, after he dies, there's a show that was misplaced that should have aired on in season 1. The network decided to take that thing because they felt it didn't flow with the season 1. They put it in season 2. The problem is, Charlie Francis, who is dead already, shows up in that episode and is a big part of that episode.
Right.
This
Hmm.
stuff happens all the time. There are create that's the whole push and pull between creator and distributor, creator and the studio. And yeah, the creator has to have some, but ultimately, what's going to happen is that the studio is always going to be the one that makes the final decision. Now, again, Blade Runner is a fantastic movie, but I don't need 5 versions of that. I would rather say, you know what, give me the version that the creator has. And like
Right.
you said,
And that's what I'm
WB
saying.
is Warner Brothers is famous for interfering.
We
But
wouldn't maybe have
that's
all these other versions if it were
right.
for
But
the
at
this
some
power
point,
being
you have to
exercised.
say enough is enough. We can't continue to refashion. Look at what Lucas is doing. Lucas continues to refashion his old movies, adding new, well, before when he had the chance, adding new scenes, adding new changes, adding new things, to the point where the 1977 original version of New Hope is a different product than the ones that we got on Blu-ray, the ones that we got on DVD, the ones that we got on VHS. There's like 5 different versions of the New Hope with new scenes added in and out in there. There's got to
So
be a
much
point where
so, so much so
Mhm.
that Disney is pining or thinking about releasing the originals on Blu-ray, aren't they? I thought I heard a
Right,
rumor about that.
exactly.
The
But at some
original,
point,
no
you
interference.
gotta stop tinkering with the movie and say this is what came out, because then you're going to get the 5 different versions of a film, and it becomes a bit of a mess.
I mean, all right. So my point is, I think that I'm probably sitting on the other side of you guys a little bit here because for me, um, if a film has been in the court of public opinion for X amount of times, such as going back to what we're discussing, which is the Zack Snyder cut, such as Joss Whedon's Justice League. Um, I think that it's a little bit of an exception to the rule simply because this wasn't the original film and intention that was supposed to be set out for us, and I think that I think that Zack Snyder did his due diligence of like, hey, like this is his film. I'm not going to chime in. I'm not going to do anything regarding, you know, comparing the two, what my cut would have been versus Joss Whedon's. If I'm Zack Snyder, right? I think that he let it be judged in the court of public opinion long enough. And then on top of that, he's not the one that clamored for it. We clamored for the Zack Snyder cut because that is what was supposed to happen in the first place anyway. And I don't think that like it's not like like the Trevorrow script is never going to happen. No matter how many hashtags you create behind it,
That's so
it's never going to
sad.
happen. It's
That's so
never going to
sad.
happen because there was no product created for it aside from the screenplay. We have a film already that was done pretty much that continues a vision that he started and for which that he gave Joss Whedon and DC and Warner Brothers a chance to put out their product, and it wasn't the one that we wanted or the one that we deserved, really. So why not give them a chance to put it out there? I don't. I think that like, yes, I think that it's a problem that we have that I think as a fan base, as as a culture, that we need to address. That hey, we shouldn't be deciding what happens to the creator's work and so on and so forth. But I think this instance it might be an exception to the rule.
You know what? Here's what I think.
Mhm.
Like, there's already, there's you already have the theatrical cut and the director's cut thing, right? That's a thing.
Mhm.
Um, I think that hmm, so.
Should that become a standard now?
Here's yeah, and the only
So then why go to the theater to
No, no,
watch it then?
no,
I
no,
don't
no, no.
think
Hold
that
on,
it
hold
should
on,
be
hold
a
on. You
standard at
can't.
all.
Here's my thing. I'm not saying you get 5 tries. I'm saying if you have very clear interference with like a movie, then maybe the creators should be given the chance and the ability to make their own, I guess, cut
Okay.
independent of what the studio thinks.
That's difficult to do, though.
I don't know. See,
The
I
studios
think
won't
that
allow
like
that. It's
you
because
know
of
I
the way the law works.
This case is a little bit different because there's 2 visions here,
the
so
thing is that I think it's tough to say that hey like we should have like director's cut as a standard. I can see like director's cuts being a standard if there's some small changes that the director wants to implement after the
Mhm.
fact, after seeing it's like, I create an essay, I handed it out, and then 6 months later, after rereading it, my thoughts have changed on something. I'd like to add an extra paragraph here. But what happened with Blade Runner and what's going on with Justice League, I don't think should become the norm, because once the product is already out, it's out there, and if we expect there to be a a director's cut that kind of revamps the story itself as a normal thing, then you're telling people that, like, hey, there's a such thing as perfect, that you should always seek it out. So then we'll end up having an industry where, like, nobody, either they put out really crappy products assuming that there will be a director's cut in the future, or they don't put out a product at all because they can't get to that perfection.
It's like the video game industry.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
Or
and that
DLC.
happens a lot in the video game industry.
And
Yeah.
and listen, there's also the case to be made. Do you remember the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck?
Oh yeah, yeah. That one. See that? Oh man.
Try not to.
Damn it!
But
They keep doing that.
there's a second version of this, right?
Yeah, I saw the second version. I thought it was way better.
That's what I'm saying. So
That's,
so
as a matter
now,
of fact, that's what I'm saying. There are
I have
some
another
movies
one.
that.
I have another one. Lord of the Rings. You have your extended editions that, I mean, where
so
does it
much
end?
better. Yeah.
Where does it end? Because you have those extended editions of Lord of the Rings that are over 4 freaking hours, and it's actually
Yeah,
better if you're a fan of the books, and if you're a fan of the movies. Like, those are awesome versions. You get so many more cool details. Where do we stop? This is a whole other conversation.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
think
I
about
think
it?
that's my point. I think that's my point. Is like, at what point do we say?
And when
Because
is it
listen,
good and when is it bad?
we as fans, sometimes we dream up of these things. It may not be the right thing to do, to be honest.
And that was
You
Peter
know what I'm
Jackson
saying?
wanting to do it in the Lord of the Rings case. So, like, where does the line get drawn? Who makes the decision? Is it the creator
Right.
themselves? Is it the fan? Is it the studio? Then you have all of the legalities surrounding that, and all of the copyright law, and all of the. It's a headache, and
yeah. I mean, I think that, like, at the end of the day, like, this is not. This is a little bit too muddy for us to, like, really kind of discuss, right? Because
yeah,
at the end
it's
of
a
the day, I think,
totally
like,
different conversation.
like I said, this is still a business.
Hmm.
We're not creating pure art, because otherwise that's what we have the indie industry for. We have different aspects of film industry. This is a business, and they're in it to create compelling stories that would drive audiences to buy the product. And in this case, consumer is always right. That's why, like, you just named off a bunch of things where, like, as fans, we wanted and needed it. Well, then that means that's what should have happened, right? Like the Lord of the Rings, Daredevil, and Blade Runner. Like, it should have happened because that's what we wanted. At the end of the day, same thing with the Zack Snyder cut. But
Batman versus Superman.
yeah,
I
I,
just
I
feel a
think
little
that, like,
bad. I just feel a little bad for Joss Whedon, because this
Telling
is
you,
really
yeah.
a different
I do.
situation than all those others, because all those others were made by a single director, and he
Look,
just said, you know what, I have a better version that you never saw.
I bring
This
up.
one
Look,
here, uh-huh.
I got to bring up Ray Fisher again. I'm sorry to cut you off, because I looked up really quickly a little bit of news. And again, I don't know who the first person to push for the Snyder cut was. It probably was Jason Momoa, like Wolfie said. I remember Ray Fisher being one of the first.
Affleck.
It was right? Or Ben Affleck, excuse me.
Yeah.
I remember Ray Fisher being one of the first. And I feel like there was almost something personal, and this again, this brings back to the point I made earlier, because I think Ray Fisher actually was pushing for the Snyder cut almost more than anybody else. Maybe
He had a
because he
bigger
had
role.
a little bit of bone to pick with Joss Whedon for basically taking everything out of the movie involving him. Because his
Yeah.
That's
backstory,
true.
everything was removed, and he was turned into a crappy character because he wasn't even there for most of the damn movie. He was just there to kind of be like a Deus Ex Machina. He's like, all right, I'm a machine that can fix this now, and there was nothing given to him. And again, the Snyder Cut has a great deal more scenes featuring him. Even before he was Cyborg, they feature him playing high school football more so, don't they? In and
Hmm.
like you said, interactions with his father before he became Cyborg.
And I
So
kind
I
of
feel
feel
like there
that
was
you're,
something personal
I'm sorry.
there. Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of feel you're totally right, because if I remember correctly, I'm actually on Vero, believe it or not,
Mhm.
and I'm on Vero just because of Zack Snyder. And if I remember correctly, a lot of the early stuff was Ray Fisher. A lot of the early stuff that he was posting was,
Pushing
hey,
hard.
here's Ray Fisher, here's
Yeah.
him broken, here's him with the mother box. It was only more recently where he started integrating more of the characters, and hopefully my memory is correct, but I kind of, the way you say it, I kind of remember a lot of that early stuff was
Right.
directed at Cyborg.
And maybe Zack Snyder is like, hey man, I'm really upset also that Joss Whedon like took you out of the movie entirely. So you know what? I'm gonna seed this entire campaign by releasing more stuff about you,
You
and
want to
then
know
we'll get to
something
the
else?
rest of it.
There's also another piece of this that like
Yeah.
I think is huge too. Like in Joss Whedon's version, we already have Barry Allen's love interest, Iris West, that was played by Kiersey Clemens,
Hmm.
and she had all her scenes already filmed and everything all good. He cut her out completely.
Yeah.
So she did all the work, I guess got paid for it, but she did not get to see herself on screen at all. And I think maybe now that I'm kind of rethinking this, maybe Joss Whedon kind of brought it on himself by like taking someone's work and then saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna destroy it."
Who
Yeah.
knows? I don't know. I don't know.
This is
Maybe
tough.
maybe
This
it's not that
I do
sadistic, but like
have maybe it's not that sadistic. No, it isn't. But at the end of the
I
day,
shall
like
destroy your career.
you know what I'm saying? Like hey, like you tell me, hey, I'm building you're building a coffee table, and it's already pretty much done. I just need you to sand it down and paint it and all that stuff. And I come in, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take this apart and build a bookshelf instead. And it's like, wait a minute. That's not what I wanted. It's like
Hey,
these legs. I don't need these legs. I'm gonna throw these legs to the side. I'm gonna just turn this into a bookshelf.
and just think about that actress that plays Iris West, Kiersey Clemens.
Yeah.
Imagine the type of exposure that she would have had by being in this movie. This could have jump started her career. You know what I mean?
You know what? Let me look her up and see. I mean, yeah. I mean, she hasn't really had anything huge since. She's only had like a couple small roles. She's in the remake of Lady and the Tramp and a couple TV shows. That's it. And
Yeah,
this
this
would have
could
been
have been
the biggest. Yeah, this would have been the biggest thing that she's ever done.
absolutely.
Besides,
Yeah, it's a shame.
Dope was pretty well received, but that was more of an indie film. So,
Yeah. There is one more piece of trivia. Actually, I know who coined the term Snyder Cut. And you may not believe who it was, but it was Jeremy Irons who had a bone to pick and said that the Snyder Cut script was simpler, smaller, and more linear than its predecessor.
oh
Wow.
man, so many layers to this that would. So was he the
Hey,
first one? You got
huh?
to believe Jeremy Irons. Was he the first one that called for this? Then probably you got to believe
I
Jeremy
guess
Irons. He's freaking
he
Scar, man. He knows.
coined Snyder Cut, and then Ben Affleck called for it. Ben Affleck created the hashtag, I believe.
Oh man.
This is crazy.
Because also Ben Affleck was also brought in after, like, even with Snyder being removed, Ben Affleck was also brought in to be a co-writer, I believe, to make sure that there's continuity between Joss Whedon's um, version and Zack Snyder's version. So he was brought in. He was already a producer, and then he was also brought in to like be a part screenwriter as well. And yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the, is there anything else actually that we haven't spoken about with the Snyder Cut coming out?
Not really. I mean, those are the major bullet points that I've been able to find on the internet. And again,
Without
like I said,
spoilers, I guess. Yeah.
this is. I'm gonna preface everything. The differences are from reports of people who have seen it, so you take it with a grain of salt. But a lot of it does seem to kind of blend in with all the concept art and all the production stills that Zack Snyder's been putting out
Yeah,
on Vero.
right.
But ultimately, we're gonna have to wait until it comes out on HBO Max before we can actually say this is exactly what happened. You know?
Well, there's one more thing, and I don't want to say this necessarily ventures into spoiler territory because we may never see this, but I kind of want to touch on what Justice League 2 and 3 were supposed to be because there were outlines for for what was going to happen. Okay, just a couple
Darkseid.
of details, and I'm getting this from the Darkseid was definitely hugely involved. I looked around and I just I'm grabbing this source from Wikipedia. Okay, these are just some of the small things that I had remembered uh, were going to be explored in Justice League 2 and 3. Okay, and here's the list. After teasing Darkseid in the Snyder Cut, which is again what we will be rumored to see in the HBO Max cut that we're getting next year,
Mhm.
he would have been the main villain of Justice League 2. Okay, so that's where the direction where this was going. That's something that I think we all kind of knew from the original, even pre-production of Justice League before Zack Snyder was removed. We all kind of had a thought that Darkseid was going to be the second villain because it was supposed to be 2 movies, I think, initially, and then they expanded it out to 3 according to this line. Okay, apparently Batman was going to die. Okay,
Oh, I was just about to like tell you that. I was waiting for you to finish being
Oh,
like, hey, I got some
that
more
reminds
stuff.
me of Final Crisis.
yeah, hold on, we're going to get to that.
Like,
We're going to
that's
get
the
to
next
that.
point. I'm cutting you off. The next point is that it's supposed to cross over to Final Crisis.
Yeah, that's one of the next points basically because the storyline would have been inspired by that. The Green Lantern Corps was supposed to appear, including Hal Jordan.
I
Okay.
feel like me and you are reading off of the same website.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at Wikipedia right now.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just looking at Wikipedia because I
Yeah.
remember some of these details, but I wanted to kind of like narrow them down and go over them briefly. Like I said, right? Because what else? Like I mentioned earlier, the nightmare scene that was in not Justice League, Batman versus Superman, that was completely scrapped in Joss Whedon's Justice League and will probably be reintroduced in Zack Snyder's Justice League, was going to figure into 2 and 3. In fact, that was going to be the main storyline. We were going to get to the nightmare scenario in Justice League 3.
Right.
Because the second one, and this is what again Wikipedia is citing this, where Kevin Smith was talking to some of the crew that were working on Snyder's films, and they were saying it was going to end with defeat. Uh, Kevin Smith compared it to Empire Strikes Back or Infinity War. So we were going to have that kind of ending to 2, and then 3 was going to be the nightmare future sequence from Batman versus Superman, and the Justice League facing off and defeating Darkseid and the forces of Apocalypse by the third film. Okay, so that's what we were going to get.
Yeah.
Go ahead, AJ.
I mean, it sounds awesome.
It sounds okay.
Yeah, it
Sounds
sounds
okay.
okay.
Oh my god. It sounds okay. 3 minutes ago. Ooh, that's Final Crisis.
But wouldn't
Okay,
it?
so the role of Eli is being played by AJ today.
I know.
This thing
Which-
sucks.
Wait. It doesn't. I don't think it sounds
It's not
okay.
corny.
It sounds corny.
It sounds corny.
Well,
I think
okay,
that's
I'm
really
not
what-
stooping down to that level, no.
And just so that you guys know, and we probably should have said this earlier, Eli couldn't be with us today because he's under a mountain of homework right now. So he couldn't make the podcast. So like I said, the role of Eli will be played by AJ.
I mean,
This is cool and
Yeah,
all, but you know,
you
there's
could
a,
only
if you were going for, I mean, I'm not saying you should structure everything after the Avengers vibe, but if you were trying to build a story like that, or in at least some parts reminiscent of that,
Mhm.
Dark World would have been the way to go.
Anything else that we want to add to this before we wrap up? I think.
I have many thoughts that are other conversations, like I said. So I don't want to do that to us.
We could have this conversation for probably 3 or 4 podcasts. So
Yeah, that's
And,
true.
well, we definitely will as we get closer to the actual release and start to see some of the behind the scenes production stuff. I know we'll be curious enough to get to this, and I know that our listeners will be curious enough to hear what the heck we have to think about it. So between now and May 2021, right, we'll have some time to revisit all of this.
All right. Well, yeah,
All right.
I can't wait for that. I'm definitely gonna see it. I don't think it's gonna be corny. Yeah, let me get your predictions. What do you guys think? You think it's gonna be well received? You think it's gonna blow Justice League out of the water? Which I mean, it seems like it absolutely will.
See, here's the thing.
Do you think it's gonna fall flat?
Yeah, so here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it gets well received or not. That's kind of my whole point. why are they even doing this?
It
Because
could be,
nothing is going to come of it.
but it could.
So
Ex-
for me,
Except
no, you don't even
better
need it.
film to enjoy. Like for example, when I go to watch Batman versus Superman, then I want to watch the follow up. Which one of the two am I going to pick? You see?
Ah, well, I for one think, because here's another thing, right? Walt, they have not decided the format yet, right? They don't know if it's going to be a movie or a TV show.
Correct.
I think it'll make a difference. Honestly, I think it will make a difference. I think that if you make it a TV show, it would be better, especially with how much he's planning to, it seems, expand it. I think it would. I think it would give room if he even wanted to expand it further. Not necessarily that much further, but if you wanted to expand it to, say, like 5 1-hour episodes or something like that, or 5 50-minute episodes, I'm not going to complain, because I think that there's a lot that they could fill in there that could make this a more coherent story, especially since 90% of it was already done. And again, 75% of what we saw was Joss Whedon's vision and not Zack Snyder's. I think there's a possibility that, yeah, if it's a TV show, it would be somewhat more successful. I think if they try to make it a movie and they try to shoehorn it into however many amount of hours, it's going to be sort of the same failure that it was before, because that's the problem. That's kind of the problem with Zack Snyder versus the studios. He wanted to make these epics, which we as fans did not mind, right? We didn't care because Batman vs Superman was already super freaking long, and then we were so much happier with the much longer Zack Snyder, it's not Zack Snyder cut, but director's cut that was like 20 or 25 minutes longer, right? So we'll take those.
Yeah.
Don't limit the amount of time that he has to tell the story. Make it a TV show. I think that then we'll get something really better than what we got. Maybe not great, but really good.
I don't know. I think that I think that the route that they should go is the Snyder Cut Part 1 and Part 2. Make it into two,
Mm-hmm.
hour and 40-minute long films, because they're both going to be streamable.
Mm-hmm.
So why not give us the break? It's not like we're paying for two separate films. It's not like we're doing two separate outings. We can watch the first part, take a break, watch the second part. So
As long as they don't limit it, I guess. As long as they don't
yeah,
limit it in any way, time wise, and just let him finally freaking finish at least this part of his story.
yeah.
All right, this is gonna be my take. I'm gonna try and
Mm-hmm.
make this pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to change.org, you'll find petitions to have Zack Snyder booted off the Justice League project. I'm looking at one right now that has
Right.
18,000 supporters, and this was 4 years ago when we had Justice League getting ready to be released, or it was in production. So for all the noise that we had for release the Snyder Cut, you got to remember back in the days, people weren't happy with his vision. And like I said, if you go on to change.org, you're going to find a lot of petitions asking to get him off the project.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that if you go back just as far as about a month, there were reports that WB wasn't happy with how Snyder keeps promoting the release of Snyder Cut on his social media.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like they were being bullied into spending more money to release the film.
They were.
And
They're right.
huh
They were. They're right.
yeah, they were, and they didn't appreciate that. And I think there are some reports, and again, these are unsubstantiated, they're just reports, but they were to the point that they weren't looking to work with him ever again. So you look at the way they're releasing this film in the context of that, it seems highly unlikely that despite how well this movie, if it does well, if we're going to see a continuation of the quote unquote Snyderverse. That being said, I am stoked to see this movie. I've always been a fan of the Snyderverse. And again, maybe I'm in the minority, but I think that Man of Steel was a really, really good movie. Batman versus Superman, not so much. I can't forgive it for its Martha moment. No matter how much I try, that to me was just a screenwriter trying to tell everybody, hey, I'm smarter than you guys. I made the connection that both Batman and Superman have mothers that are called Martha. You know, to me that just annoys me. So and I just didn't like the way that whole scene, played out. But like I said, I enjoyed the Snyder films. I'm curious to see what he would have done with Superman in this movie. I'm curious to see how Darkseid would have come out. I'm curious to see Darkseid in a film, you know? So I'm actually looking forward to this, but I don't think anything's gonna come out. I'm kind of with AJ on this. I don't think anything's gonna come out of it. It's gonna be noise. People are gonna watch it. They're either gonna enjoy it or they're not, and that'll be the end of it.
All right. All right. So, once again, for those of you that weren't listening this entire time, we are getting the Snyder Cut finally from HBOMax, May 2021. For better or for worse, we have some fans here. We have some
I don't
people
think
in
it's
the middle.
May though, Jose.
It's not May. Well, it is
Yeah,
2021.
Yeah, it is
That's all we know.
2021. I don't think they've
I think
specifically
you're
said
confusing
May.
May with Max. You're thinking
Yeah.
Max.
I heard May
Max.
somewhere. It doesn't matter if I'm
Yeah, it
wrong. Then well, we'll get it at some point in 2021, right? So whenever it comes out in 2021, it has its partisans and it has some people who are not so excited about it. So we'll see. It's going to be either a 4-hour film or a 6-part television miniseries. Possibly, there's lots of different rumors surrounding it. We will see what happens. Anyway, that's our podcast for today. We want to thank you guys for joining us to discuss the Zack Snyder's Justice League coming out in 2021. As always, guys, it would be a great help to our podcast if you would like, rate, share, subscribe, interact with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Get Geek Podcast. You can find us on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever your favorite podcasts are sold. Look us up, share us. Reach out to us on Instagram. Give us some feedback on what you think our future episodes can be, some feedback on our past episodes. And don't forget to check out some of our prior episodes. Last week, we talked about some rumors regarding Boba Fett in The Mandalorian Season 2. So please, guys, don't forget to check that episode out as well. We had a lot of fun with that one, just like we do with all of our episodes. And again, we want to thank you guys for bearing with us with some of the sound quality issues we're having. We're always working on trying to improve upon that. And we thank you for bearing with us as long as you have. And we hope that everyone, of course, is safe out there while you're listening to the podcast. So, as usual, to all the denizens of the internet out there, as usual, and as always, y'all stay geeky, my friends.